Hi, I'm John with VistaSun Solutions. I'm here today to talk to you about the Layer7 API Gateway Policy Manager, and specifically how we recommend it be set up for best practice. So you'll notice I'm logged into a gateway, but I'm going to go down into Preferences. Preferences, you will see several settings here. We'll talk about how to best set those for your needs. Inactivity timeout, we always set to 60 minutes. We always recommend people set them to 60 minutes. The main reason here is that if any user is using the policy manager, they are typically a power user or admin, and a period of inactivity could mean that someone else could come in and effectively modify things as this user. So 60 minutes or less, you can disable this by setting this to 0. It is also important to note that the gateway can override this value. They can set their own inactivity timeout on any connections from the policy manager, and that will override whatever value is in here. So 60 minutes or less, you should be in a good spot. We always recommend checking Remember Last Login ID for the simple reason that it remembers who logged in last. It's one less thing to type, it's one less thing to remember, and if you're using certificates to manage your gateways through the policy manager, the added benefit here is that it will remember your full common name of the certificate that last logged in, so it saves you a couple steps there. Policy validation feedback, we always leave this unchecked, and we recommend everyone leave this unchecked. There's two reasons here. One, if you're making a small change in a very complex policy, checking this box ensures that policy validation occurs for every time you save and activate. Sometimes overly complex policies lead to policy validation failures, but this takes on the order of minutes, whereas saving and activating should take seconds. If you really want to validate your policy during runtime when you're about to save and activate, there is a button on the policy manager that lets you do this ad hoc. I think this is a much better implementation than ensuring that every single time you save, it goes through a validation feedback loop. Gateway URL history size, I always leave this as large as possible, but I log into many gateways at a time for the period of a day. When we're talking about gateway size, if you're not logging into more than 1 or 2, you can probably leave this at a much smaller number. It doesn't harm anything to have it higher, it's just more history space. That's all it is. So we usually leave this high. Comments and assertions, we always recommend these checked. The main reason is when you have to communicate or debug your policies, you want to know what number you're talking about, especially if you have a failure. So your assertion numbers are going to appear on the left-hand column of your policy, and they are going to tell you exactly where you're at in that specific policy. The comments are very helpful if you're writing comments in your policies, which you always should do. The comments are going to give you key information on what a policy is doing and how it's interacting with assertions, with other APIs, and with routing. So we always leave this checked and ensure that you're writing good comments in your policy. Similarly, if you're enabling encapsulated assertions, if you're using them in your policies, we always recommend setting this debugging flag to be turned on. When you set this debug flag on, what ends up happening is through the service debugger, you are able to go in and actually view the internal assertions that are happening in this encapsulated assertion. Typically, this wouldn't be possible, and it only works in your custom encapsulated assertions. It doesn't work in the ones that Broadcom provides, but it's a great way to debug a little bit deeper in without having to set multiple breakpoints or potentially not being able to look into encapsulated assertions at all. Everything else we've left standard, default. You'll see this on a fresh install of the Policy Manager. All of these can be modified. This is what we choose to use for our best practice. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for learning. Talk to you later.